reached the Office of Patient Experience at University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics. To discuss a patient care-related concern, please press 1. For patient... One moment, please.
These people were supposed to call me back Friday.
Office of the Patient Experience, this is Leo. How can I help you?
Hello, Leo. I was supposed to get a call back Friday about a development which happened when I was...
You were supposed to get a call back from administration, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We have contacted them since Friday, and we're just waiting on them basically now.
Sir, I really don't like it. You know, the first time I dealt with a situation like this was over 30 years ago. And
yes, sir. I remember from our previous
all right,
call.
so like you know that I've already been adjudged by a court that I don't have any psychological problems. But you know, it would be very horrible and painful should I be riding my bicycle, have some kind of a spell where I go blind and a car runs me over. Now, before that happens, I'm going to publish that online. Now I have gone through this with you people for over 30 years. 30 years ago, I was given, my care was handed over to Dr. Rizzo, and by the way, I need his diagnosis because I'm going to publish it. So I also need to know how much that little tract of literature is going to cost me, because I have every right to it. So I want that. And I also need to just go to nuclear medicine and have some tests performed which will be covered on my Medicare. But you know, the thing is, what I have found with since I started this kind of an odyssey 30 years ago, that hospitals in Iowa are very interested in it if you have good insurance, because they will do everything to drain money from your Medicare. And I'm not in for that. I'm not a natural resource. I'm not like an oil well or a tract of lumber. There's a specific thing here that I need. You know, if I had a psychological problem, after going through the effects of this injury for 2 years in a federal institution and for 3 years out on the street, if I haven't acted out yet or needed psychotropic medications, what would make anyone in your facility think that I would need to start that now? I also have a history of a lawsuit where it was proven in court by experts that those medications, I mean any psychotropic medications, are something that is just not called for in a head injury, and that if you give somebody an antidepressant or an antipsychotic, etc., it's just like giving them LSD. And you know, I'm too old for that shit.
Right. Okay, so sir, the most I could do is I can go talk to the patient rep that you worked with earlier and see if they can send another email over to administration to see
Look, how about if you just give me the number for administration and I'll call them? Do you have a problem with that?
Give me just 1 second to see if I can find this for you.
That would be wonderful.
Interim director for the office.
Well, I'm really not surprised that lightning would strike twice in the same place.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, I am now suffering from a second-hand injury that has been delivered 30 years or more than 30 years after the first. And when I first had this problem, from being beaten up by two officers at a rock and roll club for no reason, my girlfriend, who I lived with for many, many years, who was an employee at the hospital where she took me after she picked me up from where I was beaten, I was thrown out of that hospital because I didn't have an insurance card. Now, as you know, in the state of Iowa, there is a law, and there is also a federal law, that when you're brought into an emergency room, they have to look at you.
Yes, sir.
But when I went into this emergency room, like I'd been a studio musician, as a matter of fact, one of the shrinks that I eventually was funneled to was insulted that I was making hundreds of dollars more an hour working in recording studios than he was making being a quack. I was misdiagnosed so badly because this hospital, by the way, wanted to protect two officers that for 20 years or so had been called Bump and Thump by their friends on the Scott County Police Force. And they were working as bouncers. This was their act. They would work as bouncers, and they would take deadly force to work with them, which they're not supposed to do, and that deadly force would be nightsticks. And when they clobbered me with those nightsticks, which they weren't supposed to do, and there being witnesses to the assault, I was able to sue them. And I was able to sue them after, and this is really the best part of the story, I was told, because of my alleged psychological deficiencies, that I needed to ventilate. You know, like I don't have a real injury. I'm like a stuffy room. We'll just open the window and ventilate that. And I hadn't been able to play or have any kind of a memory. I wasn't making any money. I didn't want to be bumming off a person that I had. I don't bum off people. And there was an opportunity for me to at least get some money so that I could help Julie pay the rent by doing a thing called workfare, where they put you to work in the courthouse or public buildings, sweeping the floor and doing menial tasks like that. And to do workfare, I had to have a psychological examination. So, and Julie told me, forget it. She'll pay the rent. But I didn't want to bum off her. And I figured, well, what harm could it do? Well, I was to find out, and I talked to a guy named Basker. And this guy's a Pakistani. I don't think I have to tell you how Pakistanis feel about Jews. It's in the news. Right?
Correct.
Okay, so I tell Dr. Basker goes through the regular routine that a shrink will go through. And he asked me about my life and what it's been like. So I told him, well, my life was pretty nice until I went to kindergarten, where I started getting the shit beaten out of me because I was a Christ killer. And I told him about that. I told him about the anti-Semitism I immediately started to experience when I was alone in society. And then I made the mistake, and this conversation that I had with this guy took like all of 3 minutes. And then I told him about the history of my people. I'm Jewish. The history of my people for the past 5,000 years has been one of murder, rape, and pillage. And that is history, sir. And because I told him that, I was given the worst psychological diagnosis that anybody could have. And they started putting me on some serious and powerful psychotropic drugs. Now, I found out when the lawsuit began from experts, when you give a person an antipsychotic or an antidepressant or any kind of psychotropic drug that to allegedly control a condition that they don't have, it's just like giving them LSD. So, of course, as soon as they put me on these medications, there was problems. And every couple of weeks, they would change my diagnosis. But they wouldn't take me off my previous meds. And before I started taking any of those meds, I had seen a neurologist in Moline named Honda. And he prescribed a medication called Fiorinol, which is a synthetic barbiturate, which is laced with caffeine. So you speedball. This is, it's like when druggies do heroin and coke. And you're speedballing, you're up and down. And one day, a song came out on the radio that really appealed to me. It was about the death squads in Guatemala. It was a protest song. I've always been into that. And lo and behold, I was able not only to memorize the words to that after going down the street to the Co-op record store and buying the album. Not only could I memorize the words to that, but I could almost play the chords, even though my left hand wasn't working right. I was hit on the right side of my head, right behind my ear. The worst place for a right-handed musician to be struck. It actually is. When you are a musician and your brain is geared up to be able to do that, this place in your head, behind your right ear, is a crucial place for a lot of things to go through at the same time.
So what can I help you with today?
Well, it was proven when I was able to sue those two policemen, a procedure I was told I was going to lose. When I won. But before I won, this combination of 7 psychotropic drugs, which, by the way, are listed in the PDR specifically as drugs that are never to be used in combination unless the patient is put in the hospital and is under observation, is able to be wakened every 15 minutes, and they have to take your blood every 4 hours. But they didn't put me in the hospital because I didn't have an insurance card, which is the same reason they threw me out of the hospital when Julie took me there right after I was bonked on my head.
And when did that occur?
That occurred in 1982. Now, what ends up happening in 1982 is that my girlfriend told me, "Don't go to Beer French. There isn't anything wrong with you, Jeff, and these people will get a hold of you." She'd seen this done before. And they did. And I went into a coma. I wanted to play the guitar again. And I thought that it would be better if I was a little meshuggah than to be have a little piece of my brain altered. So I submitted. That was a bad idea. And when I was sent to Iowa City Hospital for an initial examination by a neurologist, I was referred to a guy named Dr. Rizzo. And by the way, right now, I am formally asking you, and if I have to, I'll do it in writing. And if I have to do it by subpoena, I will. But I want Dr. Rizzo's initial diagnosis, because Dr. Rizzo didn't perform any psychological tests on me except tickle the bottom of my feet. Now, when he tickled the bottom of my feet, my toes curled outward. That is a significant sign that a person has a head injury. Of course, I didn't find that out until I went to court. I didn't know anything about head injury. I didn't know anything about the tickle test. That's what he did. And after he saw that there was a reason for me to be seeing a neurologist, this is what he wrote on as his diagnosis. What we have here is a long-haired, and the thing is, I don't have this, but I remember reading it just like it was yesterday. What we have here is a long-haired, bearded male. But that's not all he wrote in that sentence. I'm a long-haired, bearded, apathetic, and amoral bearded male. Now, the long-haired bearded male. Now, you do know what amoral means, correct? Okay. Now, and the rest of that diagnosis was who merely wants to sue a policeman. Now, I would challenge you or any neurologist that is currently on your staff to tell me how a diagnosis of long-haired, bearded, apathetic, and amoral male who wants to sue a policeman has anything to do with a diagnosis concerning a neurological deficit. Can you? That's right, because I was a long-haired, bearded male. I looked just like ZZ Top. I was a studio musician. I was then told by other shrinks that myself, a guy who had been making $500 an hour in recording studios, that my ability to play music was merely either a paranoid or grandiose delusion. I had check stubs. Now, when I was finally able to persuade your hospital to take me without the referral of a doctor, because the local hospital has blacklisted me, and I think that you'll find it interesting to know why. When I went into this coma, Julie came home, and she saw that I was still asleep in the morning, and I'm a musician, so my biorhythms is that I generally am up at night because that's when I'm working. You know, playing in bars and stuff like that. So she didn't think anything of it. And when she came home from work that night, she saw I was still sleeping and she didn't think anything of it. And she made supper and then she tried to wake me up. And she couldn't wake me up. But she didn't think anything of it. So then, and Julie was a fantastic artist, and she had a studio set up in our apartment. And so she went to do her artwork and came to bed around 10 o'clock, and I'm still sleeping. She didn't think anything of it. She went to sleep, and the next morning when she got up, I'm still sleeping. And she noticed that I had not moved one iota in like all the time that she had been trying to wake me up. Then she kind of started to get alerted. So she took all of my medications, put them in her purse, went to the hospital, and on her lunch hour, got the biggest PDR that I have ever seen. And she cross-referenced all the drugs. And while she's at the hospital, she threw all of my medication away. She did not call the hospital because she felt, after what she had read, that the hospital was responsible. And since I was still breathing, and I was breathing at between 4 and 6 respirations a minute, she took my pulse and told me it was weak and thready. But she still didn't call a hospital. She just threw my medications away. When I woke up 6 days later, on a Friday, I asked her for my meds. She told me she threw them away, and then she handed me the PDR, and I read why. And she went into the kitchen to do dinner, and I got in my car, which of course I shouldn't have done. You know, nobody told me I shouldn't be driving on any of these medications. I got in my car and I drove to Genesis West. I gave them back their PDR. I pointed out the discrepancies in my treatment, and I asked either to see the shrink who had engineered this potential drug overdose, and I told him, well, I'd like to talk to that guy, and I asked for his phone number. About 3 seconds later, 2 huge guys in white coats, you know, like the guys in the cartoons who chase people around with butterfly nets? Well, they came down with a smarmy little male nurse named Jim Weller. I will never forget this as long as I live. Because I asked to get the direct contact information for a guy who nearly killed me, this guy says to me that if I don't do as they say right now, and you know, they haven't filed anything like a commitment or talked to a judge about holding me, they hadn't done that. So what they did is they subjected me to an involuntary imprisonment illegally. And I was told by Jim Weller that if I did not do exactly as I was told, I would be transferred to a place where my physical and sexual safety can't be guaranteed. And I looked at this little shit, pardon my French, and I said, look, we all know about male nurses, and I gave him the limp wrist thing because I wanted to piss him off at that time, because I knew these people were kidnapping me off the street. And I said, we all know about male nurses, so you've either been watching Miami Vice too much, and this is when Miami Vice wasn't even in reruns yet. Or maybe this is a fantasy that you entertain every now and then. So I'm taken up to the PICU, and before I even know what's happening, somebody sticks a hypo in my neck with exactly the combination of drugs that the PDR told me I shouldn't have, and I slept for a couple of days, or so I thought. And when I woke up, my right hand was bandaged. And I walked out of the room, and there were like 6 or 7 other people locked up in PICU for one reason or another. And they took a look at me, and they all backed up into the corner. I don't remember anything about what happened, and you know, there's the TV apparently was not in the day room anymore. Apparently, I saw something on the news that upset me, and some of the and a piece of furniture did look askew, and the window had a big crack in it. And I didn't know what happened. But the hospital decided they shouldn't give me those drugs anymore. That is one thing. And I was there for 8 days. And I was released. I was told I was not in need of mental treatment at this time. A month later, I get a bill for $3,000 for an involuntary stay. They can't do that. I already know that. So I called up the business office and I asked them what the deal was. And they told me that they had delivered to me a series of tests which not only proved that I didn't have any kind of organic problem happening in my head, but that I was as crazy as a loon. But I didn't remember taking any tests. And the woman from the business office tells me, "There's lots of things you don't remember, Mr. Soberoff." But they said, "Don't worry about the $3,000. If I go to the hospital and sign a waiver, the county will pay for it." And I told them, okay. But when I come in to sign those documents, I would like to see the test papers that I was scored from. Because they told me they delivered clinical testing to me, and I know that a lot of that is done on paper. And they told me that I wouldn't be able to see those. And I told them, well, I'll tell you what, you talk it over with administration, and as soon as I can see proof that your hospital actually did testing on me, I'll be happy to sign your waiver. 6 weeks later, a phalanx of policemen show up at my house. And they arrest me. They take me to jail. They won't tell me why. The next morning, I got out, mind you, on my own recognizance. But I did get my indictment. And my indictment, the first line of my indictment says, "It came to the attention of the business office." Very strange for an indictment. And then it said that the defendant did threaten to launch, shoot, discharge, or throw an incendiary device into the hospital. And I'm thinking about myself, this is the song that I discussed with these people. And you know, these people had been treating me like a piece of crap for so long. They told me I was amoral. They told me that, they treat me like a pathological liar. So, every time I had any truck with that bureaucracy, whether it was in person or on the crisis line, I had a miniature recorder with me, or I tapped my own phone. So I had that conversation on tape. So I get home and I put on my best bib and tucker. I go to the cassette player that's wired up to my telephone, because I have always had a recording studio of one type or another. So I pull the tape that still has that conversation on it, and I go to the court, and I am introduced to Judge Briles, who just happened to be the same judge who presided in the lawsuit against Bump and Thump, the guys who beat me up and crippled me. And I told her what was going on, and I pulled this tape out of my pocket, and she says to me, "Mr. Soberoff, That's very good that you have that, but it hasn't gone through the chain of command or anything, so I really can't listen to that. And I knew what the rules were, and I knew how crisis lines worked. And I said, Your Honor, I happen to know that when people are talking to the crisis line, that a crisis line has to have a recording device running 24/7. So there is a record of this conversation, and you can listen to that. And because, these guys want to charge me now for a Class X felony. They want to take me into court. And Judge Bryle says, well, that's correct. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you can give me a waiver, I will waive my right of privacy on the date of the occurrence, and you can listen to the hospital's recording. And she thought that was a marvelous idea. And instantly, a bailiff brings these documents into court, and I waive my right to privacy. And within 20 minutes, Lane and Waterman, the people who have represented Genesis, Mercy Hospital and Genesis Hospital, they changed the name, but it's the same administration. I guess they changed the names to protect the guilty. Lane and Waterman, in force, descends upon the courthouse. They are concerned, and they don't want me to waive my right of privacy. So, we go through 8 months of hearings. And finally, Doreen Shifley, who is the only lawyer who ever went balls to the walls for me, gets everybody to appear who was supposed to have conducted these tests, because he knows what's going on. He's seen my criminal file. So finally, the last doctor to appear, they had the psychologist appear who allegedly delivered the tests. And then they had Dr. Basker and Dr. Nissen, the guy who I wanted to contact when I showed up at the triage desk to find out why I had been given a lethal dose of drugs, and Dr. Garside, who Judge Werling was very familiar with, because Dr. Garside is a chronic drunk. This guy has been busted in the city of Davenport for DUI over 10 times. And Judge Werling knew about it. And the thing is, Lane and Waterman are great attorneys. I wish I could afford them. And Dr. Garside never went to jail. He never went to court. Every time he got busted for drinking and driving, and the last time that I know of that he was busted, he was pulled out of his car in Devil's Glen Park with what the police described on the report as a bubbling bottle of beer. Miller High Life, as a matter of fact. I would think that Dr. Garside would have been drinking Dom Perignon. So anyway, we go through this thing in court, and Dr. Garside's testifying. And when I first met Dr. Garside, I've been a musician, professional musician, since I was 13. Dr. Garside's eyes looked like two piss holes in the snow, and his nose looked like a road map of Idaho. I'd seen that before. But I'm an Orthodox Jew. And here's a doctor with credentials sitting in front of me, so I have to give him the benefit of the doubt. So I said, well, the guy probably works long hours and he's dealing with crazy people, and this is what it'll do to you. No. I later find out that the guy's a chronic drunk, and he looks like a rummy because he is. And by the way, his diagnosis of me was I was either afraid of success or afraid of failure. Now, I don't know what kind of horoscope that is, but that was his diagnosis. Anyway, Judge Werling stops him in the middle of his testimony. And he says, Dr. Garside, I'm looking through the defendant's file and I don't find anywhere in the sealed court file part of it, which of course would contain my alleged psychological diagnoses and whatever else you have. And it would have also included the testing, the $3,000 worth of neurological and psychological testing that the hospital claimed they performed on me. And he says, I don't see anything here about having to do with any testing that you've done on Mr. Soberoff. Now, when they do testing, when you're locked up in PICU, the guy who does the testing gets a copy for his files. Vera French, which was the nut house that he was working with, they receive a copy. Dr. Basker has a copy. Dr. Nissen has a copy. Dr. Garside has a copy. Genesis or Mercy Hospital would have a copy. So we're talking about like around 6 copies of a test. And Mr. Garside looks the judge in the face, and the judge ain't going to believe him now, and he says, we lost them. They were lost. We can't find them. Mr. Bothell, you know how unlikely that is, don't you?
Well, I can't really speak with her because it's just taken place.
Yeah, I can't hardly hear you. Could you speak up?
Yes, sir. I can't speak to that because it seems to have taken place very far in the past.
Well, you know, the thing is, you know what else happened very far in the past? When a doctor who works for your facility, and by the way, I want that diagnosis. So you guys are going to need to tell me. I want to have Dr. Rizzo's diagnosis because I found out something very interesting about Dr. Rizzo in court. Dr. Rizzo has only ever testified in court for the police, because the police beat the hell out of long-haired, bearded males. And those are the kind of cases that he has testified for, and those are the kind of defendants he testifies for. So I'm going to need to have that. I'm going to need to have Dr. Rizzo's
Diagnosis.
that's right. So you guys just tell me how much that's going to cost me, and I will come up with a lucre for it, because I need to have it. Now,
That is the main thing that you're asking.
no, the main thing I'm asking for is not... Look, you guys misdiagnosed me once terribly. And I have already been diagnosed. I don't have any significant psychological issues. I don't have any more psychological issues than you or anybody you work with. I was misdiagnosed because the medical authorities in Iowa bend over backwards to protect brutal pigs. I have seen the statistics. I know how it works. And so I get on a bus. I get on the Riverbend Transit last week. And I spend several hours on a bus. We both know how miserable that experience is. I come to your hospital, and then I'm told that instead of the referral that I'm going to get to nuclear medicine, you're going to transfer me to another one of your psychiatric cracks. And this isn't going to be on an outpatient basis. You want to drain the living shit out of my Medicare. You know, that's just bull, sir. What I need to have is a 24-hour EEG and possibly a PET scan, maybe a few other tests, because, I'm not suffering from hysterical blindness when my vision whites out. I'm not suffering from hysteria when I have vertigo for a day. And the only reason I am functioning now is because I'm walking around in Rocket Park in Bettendorf with a guitar and a cane. And I was playing my guitar, and a guy walks up to me and he introduces himself to me as a herbalist. And he asks me why I got a cane. Because, like everybody else, he wants to drum up a little business. And so I told him what happened to me. That when I went to federal prison for writing the story of a woman whose Social Security file verifies that she was obtained by human traffic. I represented her, by the way, on a Social Security issue. And I've represented a lot of people because legal aid in Davenport throws a lot of people out of their office, mostly for racial purposes. And I represented this person who had been obtained through human traffic, and at the age of 5, this person who had obtained her by illegal means, under the noses of the Justice Department, Social Security, and DHS, Health and Human Services, at the age of 5, this person started to rent this person I represented out as a masturbatory wash rack. And when I read her Social Security file, which was huge, it was 3 or 4 feet thick. In those days, everything was on paper. Now it's on disc. But what I read was the most horrible thing that I had ever seen. And I decided that I would conduct an investigation. And it took me 3 years to get her file. Now, after I had met her, I was formally introduced. She had told me that she wanted to get away from her family, but she wouldn't tell me why. I just told you why. I said, well, how much could you afford to pay? And she told me that she heard I was a nice man. Her criteria was that she had never seen me try to pick up a hooker, and she'd never seen me try to buy drugs. And she'd seen me around for a while, a long time before she introduced herself to me, after finding out from people that I was a nice man and that I sometimes rented rooms in my home. I was coming home from a bar mitzvah one night, and I stopped at a local tavern to get a libation, because I don't drink while I work. So I went in to get a beer before I went home. And I saw this person, who I later represented, who had been raped all of her life, taking up residence in a dumpster on a rainy night because she didn't want to go. Something must have happened that day. And I had seen her around before, and I thought she just lived on the street. But I eventually found out what happened, and I was so appalled. Because at the age of 10, she escaped from her involuntary imprisonment. She made her way downtown. She went to both public aid and to the Social Security office and told them she was being raped. And they locked her out of the office. These people are mandatory reporters, sir. They are supposed to do something for a person who tells them that. They're supposed to start an investigation, and they're supposed to do something to protect her. But instead, they locked her out of the office, and they would only deal with her primary sexual abuser, who was running a family drug cartel. Well, she told me she wasn't getting any money from her payee, and I told her she needed to talk to Social Security, and that's how I initially found she was locked out of the office. And I didn't know why, because I had seen this person around. I never saw her act in any kind of an untoward way at all. She was quiet, she was courteous, she was nice. I never saw her act out. Yet she is locked out of a Social Security office that had for all of her life, by virtue of her Social Security file, knew that she was being horribly abused. And I took her case because, and I didn't want to. I had had enough experience representing people, and I never lost a case in front of an administrative law judge with Social Security, because I always insist on getting the entire file. And it took me almost 3 years to get Wanda's file. But during that time, I was a rich guy. I had won this lawsuit against these guys who had desecrated me. And the thing about that desecration was, the time that I had spent locked in PICU after I was given a overdose of drugs, when it came out in court that the hospital had lied and to try to charge me with that crime because I would not cooperate with them in helping them to steal $3,000 from the county. And Judge Whirling said it was just like that. He told them point blank in court before he dismissed the case against me, and then he did another thing. He sent me to private physicians in Iowa City. People unlike Dr. Rizzo. I underwent a year of psychiatric examination where I was found to not have any severe or any kind of psychological deficit. I mean, I'm just like anybody else. We all got our quirks, but I'm not crazy. I'm not divorced from reality. I don't get up in the middle of a restaurant and start talking to ghosts or spirits, etc., etc., etc.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Mr. Silver, may I speak for a moment? That's okay.
Yeah, look, what I need is nuclear medicine. And I do not need for my medical card to be drained by a hospital that will do that kind of thing. And I certainly am not going to experience any kind of interaction between a psychiatric department that already knew 30 years before that I had sustained a head injury, where the neurologist does not even want to talk about neurology who examined me and wants to talk about me being an amoral bearded male. I think, okay, now, I think, and besides, let me play devil's advocate. Let's just suppose I'm as mad as a hatter. Let's just suppose that. But that wouldn't mean I don't have a current head injury, would it?
That I can't.
No! Excuse me. Yes. A person who is crazy can also have an organic condition delivered to them by federal guards who came into my room and beat me. And I was already diagnosed with this head injury because when they beat me with clubs and a piece of a steel bed frame that they pounded my head against, they opened up my head, and I woke up sitting up in a pool of my own urine with blood coming out of my forehead. And at that point in time, the prison I was in, Leavenworth, by the way, had to take me to St. John's Hospital, where I was formally diagnosed with having a head injury because the attending physician could see the nystagmus in my head, and he knew that I didn't have it from doing drugs or alcohol because I'd been in prison. So, and he tells me this, he says, Jeff, I can't help you. You're in prison. They're not going to listen to me. So just try to get out and seek medical attention. I then was given a second diagnosis of a head injury, and these people wouldn't do anything about it. I was light sensitive. I couldn't walk. I was throwing up all the time. Classic head injury stuff. And
Well, the only reason I said that I couldn't speak to that earlier is because that's not it, my specialty area. I'm not actually a physician either.
Well, look, I understand that. But, sir, I just need to see a neurologist. I do not need to see this is part of our policy. Yeah, part of the Iowa hospital's policy is to get as much money out of an insurance company as you can. That's it. You want the money from my insurer. Now, look, aren't these tests going to generate enough money for you? These are not cheap.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It would be very lucrative, wouldn't it? But
That's right. So look, I'm just asking you guys to have a heart. I need to see a neurologist. I don't need to see a psychiatrist. But what I am going to need to do is I'm going to need to review this in front of the entire world. That's why I want Dr. Rizzo's diagnosis.
Okay. I can work to try and find Dr. Rizzo's diagnosis.
Now, what I would also like you to work at is, because, we have this requirement. When somebody comes in here with your history, and that is a history which was with a mental history, that is a history that your offices contrived from the very beginning. Your offices did that. Your offices did that. So, with this contrived, so what? So I think that we can bypass what is really not a requirement. Now I'm willing to get on the RBT bus again and come up to Iowa City. Now I know that a 24-hour EEG will take 24 hours. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I will talk to a social worker. I will not talk to a psychiatrist. Now can you help me out?
If you will allow me a chance to speak.
Absolutely.
Okay. I feel that's only appropriate because I was able to listen to.
I appreciate that.
Talk about. Okay. So from my end of things, Mr. Soberoff, what we can do, we'll look into the Dr. Rizzo's misdiagnosis or the original diagnosis that you were given. Based upon the note that was left with the provider that you just saw the other day, who was Dr. Dobbins. Do you remember Dr. Dobbins?
Yeah, I remember that guy.
Okay. So based upon the note that he left after your clinic appointment...
What's Dr. Dobbins' first name?
That information I don't have right at hand. But based upon the note that he left...
Is that D-O-B-B-I-N-S?
D-O-B-Y-N-S.
D-O-B-Y-N-S.
That you did request a 24-hour EEG and possibly a PET scan.
And the thing is, look, I'm not a neurologist. There may be other tests. There might not be anything that I can do except take. Look,
I'm not going to continue speaking over you.
I'm sorry.
Like
I'm
to
sorry.
Provide for you.
I
would be happy to tell you that.
Look.
Can I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. In his note, he indicated that you wanted a 24-hour EEG and possibly a PET scan.
Yes.
However, he thought, in his medical opinion, there was no indication for a neurological deficit.
He didn't even he didn't examine me. No doctor You know, I was beaten up at Genesis Hospital almost 3 weeks ago now. I was told by administration of Mercy Hospital and by medical staff there, and I was advised by legal aid, well, just go to the hospital and they're going to give you a referral to nuclear medicine in Iowa City. When I got to Mercy Hospital, the first thing that happened is they demanded that I show them proof of insurance.
And that was in Iowa City?
No, that was at Genesis West in Davenport. And you know, that's illegal. You can't demand somebody have insurance if they're coming into an emergency room.
If it's a private facility, they can do that.
They're not.
Okay.
And the thing is, I've been looking at these people ever since all this happened. And you know, the Genesis Hospital system does this too many times. There is a record with iowacourts.gov, and I've talked to people online who read my website. I am an old guy starts having an attack at the dinner table. They rush him to a Genesis facility. But they didn't take his wallet. And they tell him they're not going to admit him without proof of insurance. And before he could bring it back, he died.
Well, that's very unfortunate.
Well, you know what? That's not the only time Genesis has killed people in that exact same manner. And you can look that up. They have killed more than a handful of people in the last 30 years by following that illegal policy.
I'm just going to be very frank with you, Mr. Soboroff. Based upon the note that was left by Dr. Dobbins and his clinical assessment, there's nothing I can do further as far as getting you in to see nuclear medicine if you do not have a referral from another provider.
Well, I have been... Look,
That is out
do you
of
know...
my hands.
Okay, when these people charged me with this Class X felony, things were put in motion, and I wrote some letters. And at this point in time, the Genesis facility in Davenport is no longer allowed to operate a crisis line because there was more than enough evidence to show that personnel from Genesis filed a false report against me. So they're not allowed to have a crisis line anymore, and they are going to take that out on me forever, and they have blacklisted me. Now, I'm just wondering, could you by any chance just refer me to a doctor's office in Iowa City? Because I don't want to be referred to a doctor. Dr. Dobbins, if Dr. Dobbins wants to say that he's in his medical opinion that he doesn't see a reason for this, he should have at least checked my eyes for nystagmus. That would be the very least he could do. He could have even tickled the bottom of my feet. But he didn't.
Obviously, I can't provide like a referral or anything, Mr. Soboroff.
But anyway, you're really not administration, are you?
I am the director of this office who you've been...
Yes, but the thing is, you're not administration. Now, right now, I want to get the number of the head honcho of your hospital.
He is going to direct you to me, sir.
Well, that's not going to work.
Okay.
That's not going to work for him. So I would just like to know what number I can reach his office at. Because when I write this up, I'm going to say, will not comment. And in order for that to happen, I got to hear from him. He doesn't want to talk about it. So could you give me the number to that office?
That would be just if you call the main hospital.
No, I did. I've done that. I've been doing that since I had to leave your hospital last week. And you know what? I'm getting you. You're not the guy I want to talk to. And you know, I'm also told you're not a patient advocate, are you?
How so?
Doesn't the hospital have a patient advocate? Every other hospital I've ever dealt with does.
Sir, you've been talking to a patient relations specialist, which is essentially a patient advocate. Remember speaking?
So your department is the patient advocate, or is there actually someone who has the title of patient advocate?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, no patient advocate. So could you give me the line by which I could reach the CEO's executive assistant?
Sir, I'm just going to tell you right now, if you call that number, they're going to direct you back to me, but I will provide it to you, okay?
Sure.
Okay. Hold on 1 second. 356
Excuse me, what was that?
356
356
4774.
4774, and that's area code 319?
Yes, sir. So as I was saying previously, I can't get you a referral into nuclear medicine. I can try to find Dr. Rizzo's initial diagnosis.
Oh, I know that you can find it.
Okay. And then that's
Now, how much will that document cost?
that I do not know. We would have to work with our
I would just imagine that I would be charged like something like 50 cents or $1 a page.
perhaps something around
Of course,
there,
then again, you couldn't tell because, like, you guys will charge somebody like $15 for a over-the-counter Tylenol. I already know that.
Okay, sir. So we're coming up on an hour for our phone call. I think that I received all the information I need, and then giving you that number, it seems that you have everything that you need.
Well, actually, no. I would like to know when I can expect to get that document.
I'm going to work with Allison to get that for you, since that is the patient representative specialist you were working with before. And then we'll reach out to our healthcare information systems team to see if that document can be retrieved.
Oh, I know it can be retrieved. Don't tell me. The only reason why that couldn't be retrieved is because that document was instrumental. That document was one of the documents instrumental in my receiving, over and above actual damages, a punitive award of almost $500,000 because the jury knew that because of my appearance, not my behavior, but my appearance, Iowa City Hospital tried to crush me, and that the local hospital tried to crush me to defend two persons, one in particular, Laurel Mulvaney, who is actually seen delivering the blow. You tried to crush me because you wanted to protect two brutal police officers. You wanted to protect them. You wanted to determine that I was obviously crazy, counterculture, amoral, and would do anything to get money. That's how your hospital characterized me. That is how Mercy Genesis Hospital characterized me. And now they have gone the extra mile to blacklist me. I can't get a personal physician. I've called everyone. I've even called the people who are listed on my in my medical records with the government as being doctors who are responsible for my medical care. I can't get a prescription filled. I can't see a doctor. And right now, I'm giving legal aid a headache because they're taking $9 a month out of a check, my Social Security check, which they have cut drastically because I embarrass Social Security. And legal aid is going to let them sit on that in committee while I starve to death.
All right, Mr. Silveroff. I need to end this phone call.
I understand. I expect that Allison is going to try to reach me tomorrow, and she won't be able to reach me on the phone because my phone company is sending well, she'll have to wait by her phone. My phone company is sending all of my phone calls directly into an answering machine. They have not been able to correct this problem for a month. So it'll take me a little while to get back to Allison, but I expect Allison to call me up and tell me how much Dr. Rizzo's evaluation is going to cost per page.
Sounds good. We can get you that information, okay? I need to go, though. I appreciate your time.
Well, I do appreciate yours. I know this is a big pain in the ass, but then again, you guys have always been a big pain in the ass. And thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
This is Dmitry Ivanovich with the Naked Truth.